morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see me. We will find out in a second. I hope there is someone even there. That too, we will find out. And then we can, do the thing. By which I mean be productive and all of that, right? Well, yes, I can hear myself. That's a good start. Everyone should hear themselves from time to time. It will certainly make them uncomfortable, and uncomfortable is what we feel this morning because it's Monday, the 23rd of December, and everyone is not everyone, but lots of people are probably sleeping in because it's their first day off work. If they're lucky, if they work in retail or anything of the sorts, I'm really sorry. You're probably already busy and not watching this. At least I hope so, for your own sake. Hey, Apollo, how you doing? Good morning. How are you today? I have, in fact, decided to not go to the gym today and focus on finishing as much of the Mormonism video as possible so I can, fuck off for the Christmas days and not deal too much with anything else. I did record, the largest chapter yesterday. It has grown beyond all proportions, but if Brandon Sanderson's audiobooks are 62 hours long, I feel I can totally do 4 hours of Mormonism content without feeling bad about it. I mean, frankly, if you add up all the hours of just the audiobooks, not the additional textbooks and stuff that I've read for this video, I'll probably be somewhere above 100 hours. I'm fairly confident of that. What with the Joseph Smith biography alone, like one of them being 28 hours, and the other one, yeah, it's enough, is what I'm saying. So I did record the Joseph Smith and early Mormonism part yesterday. I had to do it in 3 parts because, yeah. I'm currently editing this part together. So that's something that will happen during the first sprints, while I'll be taking down notes for the next part, which is on scripture and theology. And then I'll try to record that one, and then I'll move on to the one on Brigham Young and pioneer stuff and so forth. We'll see how much of it I can get done in one day. And that's roughly the plan. Of course, also do other stuff, but So yeah, how you doing this wonderful Monday? That is true, Britain. It's almost 10 hours, I would say. More like 9. How you doing? How much reading did you get done after math sprints yesterday? Britain. Yeah, and while editing and filming and stuff in the breaks, I will probably read some Redwall, which is very cool. And I already have the first thumbnail for the first Redwall book video. Ideally, I'll get that one out on the 25th of December. I mean, yeah, I was hoping to get the Mormonism thing recorded so I can put it out tomorrow, but I am not sure if that will happen because, that's still a lot of recording in one day. And I don't know if I'm physically able to do all of that because it takes brain power. And what if I fuck up and have to re-record and all of that? That's awesome, Apollo. Having a new PC sounds like a really cool thing. Yeah, and yeah, the first Redwall book is really cool. I mean, all of Redwall is really cool. It has mouse warlords, and we all want more mouse warlords in our life. I would argue. It also has the most evil rat imaginable. It's so like seriously, it's children's books, right? But the first like evil, the bad guy in the first book is a rat, and it's called Clooney the Scourge. And Clooney the Scourge rides towards Redwall on like a horse cart that he and his rats have abducted. And at some point, one of his henchmen or henchrats falls off the cart and is actually run over by the hay cart. And Clooney the rat yells at his dying henchrat, "When you come to hell, tell them Clooney sent you." And that is really, really cool for a book that is written arguably for 7 to 12-year-olds, which is, exactly the kind of book I would have enjoyed reading as a 7-year-old, is all I'm saying. So yeah, lots of really, really cool medieval mouse action is what I'm getting today, and I'm glad I'm done with Mistborn for once. It's for now. Obviously, we'll have to return to Mistborn once the Mormonism video is out, but first I will, get a chance to talk about Elantris, which I think is actually an interesting and not really bad Brandon Sanderson book. It's not a good book in what I would really enjoy reading, but I can see an earnestness in it that I think Mistborn does lack, because also now, like, that I finished rereading the Mistborn trilogy, the first one. There's this super unnecessary part where we have to sort of mix up Stalinism and some Nazi style anti-Semitism, or at least bullshit in like a plot line. It's like, gods, right? It's unnecessary. You can do these kind of things in other ways without using the trappings of Stalinism in. Unless you have like actually something to say, which you don't, Brandon, because this is a book where you try to say nothing about any, it's it. But I guess that's sort of like the problem of being culturally Mormon or culturally American in a lot of ways. I would argue that you're incapable of having a nuanced look at Soviet conditions and so forth. And I'm not defending Stalin. Gods no, I would never do that, because he sucked. But I don't know. I feel maybe fantasy can be a vehicle to examine these kind of things, and I assume that Deathless is, for example, much better at looking at Russian stuff. I haven't read it, but I think it goes into like the 1940s as well, right, Britain? I'm sorry that you're not enjoying Deathless, Britain. I have not read it because I'm generally not that interested in Russian things. I don't know why, but yeah. And then I will probably have to once again start looking at what I will read once the year is over. Projects for next year. I think that the first novel I'm excited for is Nnedi Okorafor's Death of the Author, which yeah, it's Afrofuturism meets meta-fictional stuff, and with that title, I mean, I'm sure I'll love it. It's I'm very excited for it. But Britain, it's. I feel like dramatic monologues work really well in this sort of like Russian context. I mean, if you read Russian novels, right, there's a lot of like dramatic monologues in a lot of those as well. I feel it's more like going for that specific vibe, possibly. But then again, who am I to comment on those kind of things? Best Russian novel I've ever read is, of course, The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov, which does also very much criticize conditions in Russia in Soviet Russia in the 20s and 30s, but does so in an interesting way that Brandon Sanderson is, I fear, functionally incapable of. So that is sort of where I'm at the moment. I might still, get some of the Some of the William S. Burroughs stuff read before the end of the year because then they'll be taken out of the Audible Plus catalog, apparently, or according to a note that is on there. But I feel those are sometimes misleading because years ago or a year ago, it said the same for The Salt Roads by Nalo Hopkinson, and then it stayed, and I could still listen to it, which is good because The Salt Roads by Nalo Hopkinson is a very powerful book. If magical realism and Caribbean slavery are the kind of things that you want to learn about. It focuses heavily on the slave revolt in Saint Domingue, which then obviously became Haiti, and it's also focuses on the life of a black prostitute in Paris in the 1800s, who is the mistress of Charles Baudelaire, and on a third black prostitute, second black prostitute in 4th century Alexandria, who then goes to Palestine and becomes the Black Madonna of Palestine. It's a lot, but it's really, really well done, and talks a lot about black femininity and oppression, of course, and highly recommend it if you can get it. Well, I haven't read Deathless, so I can't really comment on that. There's another one by Valente that I want to read, and that is the Glasstown game, which is apparently about the Bronte sisters, and a game that they played in a glass town which was one of their toys, and how they then are sucked into the fiction. So it's sort of portal fantasy with lots of Bronte references. I'm just slightly worried that I haven't read enough, any of the Brontes to actually, get most of the references, which is a shame because there's also a Tim Powers novel on a similar subject, and I guess it might be an interesting project to read both the Glasstown game and, is it called My Brother's Keeper? Possibly My Brother's Keeper by Tim Powers. And look how both authors deal with that. I'm generally a huge fan of Tim Powers' stuff. He's really, really good. Well, I already told you that you should read the Refrigerator Monologues, because that one is really funny and very, short and punchy and all of that, and has the comic book background as well. So maybe that's something for you for the future. But yeah, Tim Powers, My Brother's Keeper. I think I probably have to look that up. In general, I should read more Tim Powers because the ones I've read I really enjoyed. I think Declare is probably the one that I enjoyed the most, although the Anubis Gates is also really, really good. And The Drawing of the Dark got like a new audiobook, so maybe I will try that. That's his first novel, and I haven't. I've read some reviews where people was it Amal El-Motar that talked about it? It might have been her, about the sort of element of like Orientalism that is unfortunately baked into that. I feel he's gotten much better with that over the years. So, but I like seeing where authors come from. Also, it's about beer. Oh, and Last Call is back on. Now that is good. I am very happy, so I can read the entire Fault Line series, which is also a very good thing. More Tim Powers is always a good thing. It's one of those stupid things, the Tim Powers stuff, because all of his books were available in Audible for me for a long time, and I got some of them, and then they were region locked and did no longer show up for me. So I couldn't get the rest of them, which is really annoying. And some of them have just popped up again. So I'm gonna do the reasonable thing, which is, of course, get them immediately before they vanish again. Amal, yes. Palimpsest. I haven't read Palimpsest. My friend, who's a huge Cat Valente fan, always said that she found that one really weird because it's about sort of like vampires that procreate through sex. So there's a lot of sexuality in there, which I think my friend is not a huge fan of for reasons, which, understandable. Now that must have been somewhat confusing having both palimpsests in there. Where was that? I recently came across one of those really stupid misuses of the word palimpsest, but I forgot where that was. Yeah, the thing is, I really want to read more Valente. I just don't want to read the what's it called, um, the space, the Eurovision books. And I keep forgetting what the space opera and Space Oddity now because I'm just not interested in Eurovision Song Contest and stuff. And so I feel the joy that other people have gotten from those books is lost on me because I'm not even I don't get the sort of like camp and enthusiasm and all of that stuff around Eurovision Song Contest in general. So having a book that is subverting, raging, and also celebrating that thing, it's probably just like not touching me, I guess. So who knows? But yeah, Tim Powers definitely an author that I really enjoyed. Declare, the Anubis Gates is, it has horror clowns in 19th century London. What do you want, right? And then there was The Stress of Her Regard, which is about vampires and Percy Shelley and Lord Byron and others, which is obviously also really cool. And I've read, of course, what's it called? The one that was turned into a Pirates of the Caribbean movie, The Fountain of Youth. I can't remember. On Stranger Tides, that's the one, which I felt was probably the weakest, which is a bit of a shame because I do generally like pirate stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Somehow didn't really work for me. Which brings me to another book that I really want to read, and that's The Pirates by George MacDonald Fraser, because that sounds like exactly the kind of book that I would probably really love. What with it being very meta fictional about pirate movies and pirate history and stuff. And I do enjoy a Flashman book from time to time. I have to sort of like space them out because they are very, very painful with all the sexism and racism and so forth. Apollo, I think you can totally read the rest. There is some sort of important sort of information happening in that one sex scene that is relatively detailed, but it's literally one that is really detailed. And that's very much a scene, as I said in the video, it's a scene that plays around with, a lot of like bondage elements and the element of like domination is sort of thematically important, but I think you can totally mostly just like leaf through that, ignore the details, and maybe focus on like just like the few dialogue bits in there that do provide some little information, but most of it I think you can just like skip and read the rest around it, and you won't lose much about it. It's I see why it's in there, and I think it makes sense to have sort of like well, a positive and unapologetic depiction of kinkier queer sex in a fantasy book, because of all the all the conversations that are happening in parts of the queer space, when it's every year you have the whole like, does kink belong to pride or not, and you have taking a stance in this regard and being unapologetic is very much what this book does in a lot of ways. So I understand why it's in there, but I can totally see that you want to skip that, and I think it is skippable in that regard. I don't remember there being any vital thing being communicated in there. The vital thing is communicated at the end of the scene. Also, it starts as a fight scene, so you know. Well, I mean, it is important for one of the characters, sort of like one character relationship in a way, but it is also the sex scene doesn't really matter that much, because they keep having a relationship afterwards, which is still sort of dominated, or which is still has that specific dynamic in it, outside of the actual sex. So you can skip the sex scene, is what I would argue. Yeah, as someone who is not a part of the queer community, I don't. I would not make any judgments on that. I can only look at these books from like the outside and go like, well, I've learned something, and I think it's good that people like me get to read these books and maybe understand, queer topics a bit more, and that's what I'm trying to do. And just to be clear, Oki, Britain. The Flashman books are incredibly sexist and racist, but that is not because George MacDonald Fraser is racist, but it is because he's writing first-person narrative of a British officer in the 19th century, and that guy is a massive dick. Like, he's an unlikable character in the books. That's the point. He's an asshole, and he's incredibly sexist and racist. So while the books are really fun to read, and when Fraser gets a lot of it very much very right, it can be too much to read more than one or two of them in one go, because that dude's comments on women and the people in the countries that is stationed as an officer, which are India, Afghanistan, parts of Africa. He goes through all those. It's like the Sharp novels by Bernard Cornwell, but arguably better. I mean, I haven't read the Sharp novels, but having read four Bernard Cornwell novels by now, I don't think he'll get the level that like a MacDonald Fraser gets in his in his approach. I mean, I've heard the Sharp novels are historically very accurate. I wouldn't know, because I'm not that much of an expert on that specific topic, but I don't think they can reach like the MacDonald Fraser level of just hitting the tone right. Like, if you wanted to hate British officers and sort of like lower nobility, lower aristocracy British officers in the 19th century, the Flashman novels are the book to read. They will make you hate those people a lot in a fun way. Interesting is that he also like. There is an audiobook, and I'm going to get that audiobook at some point by MacDonald Fraser, that has both The Pirates, which is his pirate novel, and his book that is, I think it's Black Atlas or Black Hercules, one of those two, which is a historical novel about a black black boxer in late 19th century London, and that one goes hard on racism, and the racism that someone is a successful boxer faces in the boxing ring in the 19th century, and how he's exploited by white managers and so forth in a lot of ways. So Fraser is aware of racism. He just uses it tactically in these specific books to be mad about 19th century imperialist England, which, go ahead, man. So that's maybe those would have been like a good suggestion for like the Christmas reading as well, the Flashman novels. Yeah, totally get that, Apollo. And I mean, there are situations where I feel that having graphic depictions of sexuality in books are important. Up to a point, I think that's what Richard K. Morgan went for with his Land Fit for Heroes books. Although my views on Richard K. Morgan have changed over the years a lot. What with him defending J.K. Rowling and becoming a TERF, but I guess that's just what happens if you live in Britain and are over a certain age, which is sad. Uh, but him writing like a very angry, grimdark, epic fantasy novel, and having very graphic queer sex in there, like both gay sex and lesbian sex in there, was very much a tactical choice to very much piss off conservative fantasy fans at the time, and it certainly worked. He got a lot of hate mail for making fantasy queer, and I feel the sad part is that it had to be someone like Richard K. Morgan to do that, because the people that get pissed off by Richard Morgan putting gay characters in his epic fantasy, they would never read epic fantasy written by a woman or an openly queer character, a queer writer to begin with. So to hit them, you have to be sort of part um, of the privileged group of being white, hetero, cis men, I guess, which is, I don't know. There's certainly something in there, but as I said, I'm reading his later sort of blog posts and stuff on the whole gender issue has certainly made me sour on Richard K. Morgan, and I don't know what I would think if I would go back and reread the trilogy now, which is a bit of a shame because as books, I feel especially the first one, The Steel Remains, is probably one of the best sort of grimdark novels, just like purely from like a writing standpoint. Like the level of adrenaline, the level of rage, and not hiding behind irony the way that someone like Joe Abercrombie does, just like being in your face angry about capitalism, being angry about monopolies, being angry about the church, being angry about bigotry. All of that is so in your face that it's really really a ride. But yeah, it's kind of difficult to sort of square that with Morgan turning the way he turned later, and that's so frustrating because in those kind of books, you're separating the art from the artist is kind of difficult when it's very clearly political art, right? I mean, all art is political, but if the politics are so front and center in a text, then seeing the politics of the author change after that feels like a betrayal in a way that it would not necessarily feel otherwise, I think. See, Delaney is another author that I really need to read more of because he's so fucking interesting in so many ways, and yeah, no. Richard Morgan is never ironic. He's always in your face. He was in your face with the Takeshi Kovacs stuff, the Altered Carbon series, and he was so with the the Land Fit for Heroes. I think what I don't know if he's a full fan of J.K. Rowling, and I don't know whether his views have changed since then. But he certainly was when that whole like Maya Hofstetter, one of those Forstatter, I think, whole thing happened. He was very much on the on that train. I don't know if he got off that train again, and because I've avoided reading what he says on his blog, and he hasn't put out a book in ages, so I didn't feel like thinking about it too much. I would hope that he has realized how ridiculous Rowling is in all of her hatred. So I hope he has distanced himself at least from Rowling, but you know, it's still frustrating. Yeah, I mean, I can see that. Like, he had always been like a very outspoken feminist, and I think he just never really thought about trans issues to begin with, and then the British specific climate being the way it was, I guess it was somewhat inevitable for him to go down that the turfy side of things. And yes, I don't think opinions change that much. I think it was, especially with like, and that's one of those things I find it difficult to speak about, because what with me very much not being trans and all of that, I feel like transgender people, transgender topics and issues were very much out of like the public's mind until like a decade ago, roughly. Before the whole, it it, it took some digging and like active searching for people in say the mainstream, people who are, not queer, non-queer people, straight people, or people that are not even associated with, say, the queer community in some way or other. You had to actively search to come to transgender discourse, unless you read Judith Butler or whatever, right? And that is something that changed, I feel like, a decade ago with and through social media, and that is a good thing. But that also meant that like people that had never confronted it before had to come to to terms with it. And I can see that for a lot of people that led to some form of how can I say this? I think because gender and sexuality are often so deeply ingrained in our personality, often on like a subconscious level, where we don't think about, like, that's a privilege, right, of being cis and straight, is that you don't have to think about that. It's like I never thought about my masculinity. It's not something I have to think about because, yeah, right. That's the privilege right there. So having to confront these things up, like consciously confront, leads to a lot of pushing away and sort of defensive reactions with more conservative people. And I've had conversations with friends about this, who are like, well, I have, obviously I'm pro trans rights and everything. That's clear, but do all those transgender people have to be in my social media feed all the time? And I'm like, that's I think sort of the problem is that it's accepting something on a rational level, and going like, of course I'm for that, and also accepting that this is now part of the public discourse in an active way. I think those are two different things, and that's sort of where I feel a lot of people that seem to be progressive, liberal, somewhat on the left, definitely feminists and so forth, but also somewhat older, where they sort of fell down that turf hole in a lot of ways, is because they were forced to confront like thoughts about like gender identity for the first time in their lives, and that can be visceral in a way, and I think that's sort of where that happens. I'm not here to have sympathy for those kind of people, but I feel it's important to sort of try to understand the reason why a lot of people went down that rabbit hole, or for one way or another, and are so difficult to get out of there. Is that is for the first time that people had to confront their own gender identity, and I feel that's part of it. And yeah, I don't know what to do about that. Hey Asa, how you doing? Christmas holidays in Sweden, I assume. I agree, Ori. It was certainly on Twitter. I'm just saying 10 years ago. It may have been like even earlier. I don't know. I was using 10 years very much as a vague number. And it was certainly on Twitter. I was not very active on Twitter, even though I had an account. It certainly did not necessarily come into my Twitter reading at the time, but that's more on me not being sort of in the same Twitter or social media sphere that I am in now. And it certainly wasn't very big in, say, the heavy metal sphere, which is even slower when it comes to social change than, say, the fantasy sphere. Which reminds me, I still have to listen to that podcast about white supremacy in speculative fiction. This sounds so much like the kind of thing I'm interested in. Maybe I can read the book, and maybe I can ask the guy, the author, to come on to the channel for a conversation, because I guess I have a different audience from the academic podcast that he was on. That would be really cool. Okay, yeah, that's a bit of a problem, because I feel like Richard Spencer is very much the past when it comes to the alt-right and right wing and white supremacy stuff in 2024. Isn't do from what I know, and I'm obviously only on the sidelines, I feel like current Nazis and neo-Nazis and right wing people and white supremacists in the US are over Richard Spencer, are probably making fun of him as being an old dude. I don't know if they call him boomer yet, but I feel like but maybe that's the problem of writing a PhD thesis. I think the book is his thesis. It like from looking at the page count, it feels like it, and the press, it felt like it was probably like a PhD thesis. And maybe that's like if you do like 5 years of research, by the time you publish the book, the scene has moved on, things have moved on, discourse has moved on, and so maybe that's part of why Richard Spencer is such a big name in there still. But I don't know. It feels like it's an interesting topic, and certainly, something I've thought about before, and made a video about when I talked about escapism for Nazis, and it always comes back. Is sadly the problem there. So having an academic text to cite would be something. So I'll definitely look into that more. Yeah, that's true. The whole second wave feminism is its own, big topic. I'm not even in there by a long shot, right? I've only scratched the surface. I know there are lots of issues when it comes to the more like white middle class part of second wave feminism, and how it did certainly in parts antagonize black feminism and parts of the queer community. But it's a whole thing, because political movements are messy. Nice. Yeah, maybe I'll have to look up the name of the author again, and then I can follow them on Blue Sky as well. Sounds like he might be someone worth following and talking to. Speaking of, shall we do the first sprint and do like 45 minutes of productivity, going through emails, writing a script for me talking about Mormon theology and other productive things. I feel that might be a good thing at this point in the morning. And yeah, I think that's what we'll do, because I also need to make more tea because I'm running out. And that is something that we cannot have. So I guess we'll do that, and I'll be back at 9:25 my time. And I'm back. Sorry, this took a bit longer. I got, well, not sidetracked, but caught up in the whole editing video thing. Because the thing that I have to do when I do editing is, of course, I have to do this by listening to the stuff if I want to cut things out or leave things in. And that means I have to take that file and then I have to scroll to the position where I roughly think it is. Then I have to listen to it and write down the actual seconds, possibly microseconds and all of that shit to then put it into the command line of FFmpeg to then do the cutting. And yeah, that's why I was slightly late, because I got stuck scrolling around in an audio file. And I did not want to interrupt that quite just now, because, you get it. It would mean starting all over again in the next sprints, and I didn't want to do that. I'm sorry for that. Anyway, how did you all do? Just, to get things started again. As I said, I did some stuff. I did certainly look up the white speculative whiteness book, and I was happy to find an open access version of that book. So that's something. I also had to realize that I forgot to get my mother a Christmas present, which is bad. Guess I have to look into that today. The thing is, I usually give her books, and finding a book that I think would be she would like is sometimes a bit of a challenge, especially if I also try to give her books that I think are good. I gave her last year, 2 years ago, I gave her for a present, I gave her The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson, and for her birthday, I gave her the German translation of Maror by Lavi Tidar. So I'm trying to entertain and educate, as always, and sometimes maybe radicalize, which is why I also gave her The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow at some point. So I'm trying to strike a balance between these kind of things. And the problem is that since I've stuff that I've read this year where I'm like, yeah, she would definitely like that, it does not necessarily exist in a German translation, and depending on what kind of book, I don't want to tax her English skills too much. Obviously she does speak English, but reading for leisure in a different language is not necessarily something she does a lot of. So I don't want to force her to go through something very difficult in English, which makes the choice somewhat difficult in this regard. I thought like Cahokia Jazz might be something up her alley, but that does not exist in German yet. I'm sure it will get a German translation, but not for now. So that one's out of the question. Now I'm thinking about giving her the German translation of Cannibal Capitalism by Nancy Fraser, but that might just be a bridge too far. I'm not quite sure. It's a good book, though. I really, really appreciate the way that Fraser does break things down to like an accessible level and does not, go all hardcore Marxist theory on the reader. That is, I think, very helpful and very much needed in these days. So yeah, that's something I try to figure out. Also, obviously, it kind of depends on where I can still get, what kind of books the local bookstores here in the city do have, because time is running out, which is partly the problem, I guess. But I have managed to cut all the parts for the Joseph Smith chapter of the Mormonism video to size. Now I just have to put them together and then add bits and pieces. And yeah, it's already way too long, that first part, which is a bit of a problem. And uh, so that's roughly what I did. Let me see how you did. I do have definitely access to university library stuff still through my flatmate and another friend who works at a different university, so I can get a lot of stuff through that, those kind of things as well. But yes, open access is very much cool, and for something like this specific book, I feel it's even more important because while I think open access for science papers is really good because depending on where on the world you are, your university doesn't necessarily have the money to pay for those really expensive journals and shit like that. With something that has very much an interest to for the greater public, I feel it's even more important to not hide the keep those things behind paywalls because academic books can be very, very expensive. Yeah, yeah. Siege of Burning Grass is another one that I think would be perfect for her, but yeah, not in English because it is also not the easiest English as either, right? But yeah, um, one thing that I really appreciate about not necessarily like open access as such, but Oxford University Press has apparently had a deal for like a large part of their books with one audiobook company, Tantor Media, and all of those, or a large part of those, are included in the Audible Plus catalog. So a lot of academic books that come from Oxford University Press and some other university presses can be are included in the Audible subscription at the moment, which is really good. There's some really important stuff in there. Technically, the Anatomy of Fascism is part of that, although I think that's one that will go back to normal, having to pay a credit for later. But other interesting things like some of Jonathan Israel's books on the Enlightenment, the radical Enlightenment. His last one, the Enlightenment that failed, which is like a 60-hour doorstopper on radical Enlightenment philosophy and what happened afterwards, that I still need to read, um, is for free at the moment, which that's based because otherwise, why would people read those? And I think most of these very short introduction to subject by once again that are from Oxford University Press, which are good introductions to a lot of interesting subjects, are also part of that free sort of deal they have with Audible, which I have a lot of issues with Audible, don't get me wrong, lots of them actually. But I think that part I think is really, really helpful. Would I love it for them to be like, I mean, I assume they will be a part of those places like Everent, Script, or Storytel as well. I hope so, but I haven't checked. I mean, I think with Siege of Burning Grass, it might just be a matter of time because it came out earlier this year, and translations do obviously take some time. Same with something like Metal from Heaven, where I assume, as I said, I think it's certainly a candidate to end up on, say, a Hugo nominations shortlist next year because I think it does capture the zeitgeist in a lot of ways. It does speak to a lot of the kind of people that go to World Cons and are willing to pay money to vote and nominate in the. Well, I think anyone can nominate, but voting is restricted to the people that are part of the Hugo that go to WorldCon or pay for one of those online memberships. So I feel Metal from Heaven does very much speak to that specific demographic in a way, the same way that Some Desperate Glory did last year. And Some Desperate Glory is also like a really, really good book. I kind of beat myself up over the fact that I read it earlier this year, like in January, February, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm like, should probably make a video about this. And then my camera broke at the time, and I didn't do it. And then when I was able to film again, I did not. I was like, guess I have to reread it, and I didn't. And then it won like both like the World Fantasy Award and the Hugo Award. And I'm like, fuck! If I had had like a video on it out, that would have been really good. And anyway, Some Desperate Glory, really cool book. It can very much be major pain in the ass. I agree with that. I think you can, in fact, search by publisher, so that does help in a lot of ways, and that's certainly one way. I mean, I've found a lot of those just by searching for specific things and being pleasantly surprised to find that some of them were in fact free, which neat. Even some of the Mormonism research material, which I like. One thing that I found fascinating, though, is that the audiobook version, the official audiobook version for the Book of Mormon, which is, published by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and everything, that one is not free, which I think is probably what I could probably accuse them of ableism if I wanted to, right? Because they hand out Book of Mormons for free at every street corner, the printed ones. But if you want like the audiobook version because you can't read the printed book, that's when you have to pay. But I'm not going there. It's fine. Audiobooks cost a lot in production. I get it. You think it's too popular and uncool? I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see how popular it actually gets in the next couple of months. I mean, it came out like Metal from Heaven came out in October, so it's not been out for long. We will see. I guess I still have to sort of like look through some of these, like other shorter short lists and best of lists that I usually pick up some interesting things on that I haven't gotten to yet. For example, what's the one, the practice, the something, and the chain? I think that might be one that I might enjoy if I can actually get it. I don't know. I know that Vajira Chandrasekhara was recommending it as one of the best books of the year. But I don't think I can get the practice, the whatever, and the chain in audio yet. The same way I can't get Rake's Fall by Chandrasekhara yet, which is annoying. But apparently, Solaris Books are bringing it to the UK, so maybe that means that they'll also do the audiobook for the UK, because I know that Saint of Bright Doors does have 2 versions of the audiobook, depending on publisher. It's so ridiculous, but A Stranger of Olondria, maybe. It's not necessarily my thought process. I do sometimes avoid books that large parts of BookTube are talking about in a lot of ways. I'm like, the Adrian Tchaikovsky problem, and so forth. But since most people that do the kind of BookTube that I'm sort of still somewhat associated with for whatever reason, are not necessarily reading the best of lists of, say, Reactor Mag or even Locust or any of those, basically, they don't know that like everyone else is talking about books like, say, Metal from Heaven, or last year Some Desperate Glory, because they'd never heard about that. They don't go there, which is why then someone like Bookborn can make a video complaining about why all these political queer books win Hugo Awards and so forth, and like, well, that's because you're not part of the community that votes for Hugo Awards. That's why you don't understand why this is happening. Yes, maybe the Practice, the Horizon, and the Chain will get one. I don't know. I still I'm still wondering if I should read Chain Gang All Stars as well. It sounds like something that I might enjoy or that I might find incredibly obnoxious. I'm just not sure about that. Which one? Which one is Philip Chase planning to read? I mean, I know he's planning to read Dandelion Dynasty. I remember him. I remember him talking about that. But I've watched his like what he's planning to read next year book series, and I try not to comment on that. I know he's going to read The Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell, and I'm very much worried, and I will not watch his videos on that for reasons. Because I doubt he'll mention the things that really, really annoyed me about the book, and he'll just talk about how wonderful the depiction of, 6th century Britain is, and wave around the fact that he's a medievalist and that it's his favorite era and all of that, and that will make me very sad because I'm pretty sure he'll pick up on the on the anti-intellectualism and the homophobia and the misogyny, but being a very positive booktuber, he rarely ever mentions these kind of things, and that will make me very sad. I love the fact that Stranger in Alondria is has already the tag classic on Audible, which is interesting because it's like 10 years old now. Hey Kat, how you doing? Breaking Spines, are you talking about the Magdeburg thing, or is there something more that has happened that I haven't looked at yet? Um, I am obviously far away from Magdeburg, which has one of the ugliest train stations in I've ever been to, which I know is beside the point. So it, it's all fucked, is what it is. And I'm very worried for our elections in February because this kind of stuff is going to, play into into the cards of the far right and the moderately far right, which claims to be Christian Democrat, and the the very weak-spined. Not so far right, which claims to be, social democrats and so forth. And that's the sad part about like about terrorism, right? You can achieve a lot of like effects with those kind of violent crimes in a lot of ways. Um, that trying to do the right thing is much harder than trying to be a massive asshole, is what I'm saying at the basis. And I don't know what to do about it. It's frustrating. Besides, the human tragedy and the fact that obviously having people with all kinds of trauma and mental health issues, which seems to be the case in this in the Magdeburg situation, being able to do these kind of things. But once again, like you can't you can't protect against everything, and that's where I'm standing. I just see the fallout of it already happening, and Elon Musk endorsing the far right AFD and all of that. It's like we're so fucked. I guess my goal is to go on Twitter and convince Elon Musk that it's a really good idea to become the CEO of a health insurance company and hope that that does take care of the problem. But I'm not sure if that's a winning strategy either. That reminds me, I should probably see if the Book of Love by Kelly Link is available somewhere in audio, because yeah, Kelly Link is really cool. So that might be worth checking out as well. So yeah, I guess that's where I'm at the moment with all of this. Yeah, shall we try another sprint? What with me deciding to not go to the gym, this is all going to be it's all a bit more slow this morning, I feel. But we could try another sprint for like 45 minutes, and I'll hopefully get the whole thing sorted out and write down the Mormon theology script, which is the next big sort of step that I need to take. And yeah, that's going to be interesting. And the one on Brigham Young and Pioneers after that. It never fucking stops. Let me check for the Elizabeth Beth Hand thing. They used to be. I also want to read more Elizabeth Hand because I really enjoy what she's doing. It says included until December 31st. But who knows if that's true or if they all have that all until like the next licensing deal comes up. So yeah, I'm available until the end of the year, supposedly. But that's the interesting thing, right? Breaking Spans with the nationality, he is Saudi Arabia, comes from Saudi Arabia, but he was a violent anti-Muslim activist in a lot of ways. So it's interesting to see how they'll spin that because you can't go Islamophobic on him, but so much of Islamophobia is obviously racist in nature and not actually about the religion. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fuel all of that. So we'll see how that continues. But as I said, I'm very much worried about our upcoming elections. They're going to be yeah, Germany's not heading in a good direction. But that's kind of true for the rest of Europe as well. So we're all fucked, I guess. The sad conclusion. Anyway, let's try and do this and sprint until something like a half past or 35. 35 sounds like a reasonable moment. Let's try and do that. All right. I am back, and I was maybe slightly productive. Only slightly, though. Can't have too much of, product. So, did you get stuff done and all of that? I started scripting out the scripting scripture. Now that's a project for that is very much well done in these holiday heavy times. All right, here we are. Yeah, of course. Everyone can be racist. That's kind of the problem with racism. And good for making tea. I made more tea because yeah, I needed more tea. Right now, I'm drinking some. I think it's an Assam, but I'm not quite sure. Some relatively cheap black tea I bought in like a 1 kilo plastic bag. It's very definitely high quality in every sense, but since I go through like five pots of tea per day at least, buying bulk is something I have to do from time to time. But I totally get the love for Earl Grey. I do switch up with Earl Grey from time to time, so that is definitely something that is happening. Talking about Caesar with your mom sounds like a very productive thing. Oh, that's right. You left Leuven and are now with your parents because of uni holidays and everything. Wow, coloring. Yeah, I've never understood like the love for coloring books. Like even when I was able to use coloring books and all of that stuff, and had got to do it like in school and everything, like primary school at the end of the day, right? But that maybe that's the old ADHD thing that I just don't have the patience, and it's highly frustrating to to do that. But maybe that's just like a me problem. I'm well aware of of the possibility. Okay. Sorry, I missed that one. Anyway, that's a very typical male behavior of me to interject myself in all kinds of conversations, isn't it? Yes. So the first chapter of the Mormonism video is currently rendering the fade in and fade out part, and it turns out it's 78 minutes long, which is fuck. This is not going to end well. But it's going to take a while to finish rendering, and we'll see how far I can get before I leave, because I see in my dreams I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna finish this and put it up on Christmas Eve, and that's that, and that would mean recording the entire day, and there are certain like physical limitations on how much recording I can do because my camera overheats, so I have to sort of put it into smaller bits, record those, wait for my camera to cool down, record the next part, and there's only so much of that I can do in like one day, so we'll see how much of it I can actually get done. I think Apollo. I guess with ADHD, it kind of depends on like what you can focus on. And if you get into like the hyper focus thing, then it totally totally can work. Um, I guess for me, maybe part of the problem was that even back then, obviously, I had already low vision, which makes coloring something much harder than it would otherwise be, because chances are that you fuck it up and color over the lines and all of that stuff, and once that frustration kicks in of not getting it right, that's sort of like where the ADHD can take you out of it completely, and then make it even harder to focus and so forth. I think maybe that's sort of a part of the problem there for me. I don't know. No, 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 it's totally fine, Apollo. I don't know if I'm a prime example of toxic masculinity. I can be, trust me. I'm trying to not. I'm trying to not be. And see, that's like one of those things. Once again, where like ADHD, I feel sometimes kind of kicks in, because the whole like interrupting people and having to say whatever is on your mind, once it just jumps in, is something that is both something that I've witnessed with other people with ADHD, irrespective of gender, but it certainly combines well with like the masculine urge of always knowing everything, and interrupting people and dominating conversations. It's sort of like dovetails nicely there. Something I've you can see that when you're like watching older like panel discussions that include Patrick Rothfuss as an author, for example, because Rothfuss is obviously has ADHD, and he's very bad at keeping to like a panel conversation, and not letting and letting other people speak and so forth. And as I watched those, and I'm like, holy shit, he's annoying. And then I'm like, no. When I look back at me being in like situations like that, group discussions, panel discussions, whatever, it's like, yeah, I do the same fucking thing, and I try to not do it as much, but I'm certainly struggling with it, and it's certainly something I'm aware of. Yeah, frustration is sort of like the main enemy, I feel, and certainly something that I've encountered in all kinds of other situations as well, right? Like, especially with the whole like even like stuff on the internet, right? I should do much more sort of like uh, channel management, right? Like the YouTube channel, I should do more maintaining stuff, putting stuff into proper playlists and all of that. And all of that is minimal work in general. You just click on stuff and drag it around. But if you can't click and drag around, you have to do it by keyboard, and it takes longer. And just doing that is like, the more I do it, you have this like physical resistance building up inside, right? Like I have this like, I can't do this anymore, and that's certainly something I've certainly struggled with in the past, and I will continue to struggle with. And when you look at how websites are constantly made shittier for all kinds of reasons, yeah, it's not a good look, is what I would say. And yeah, we'll see how it goes, but that's certainly it. Yeah. So I'll record like one of those like weekly updates later today. I'll try to do that in between, the Mormonism production productivity, and then it'll be Redwall time for the next couple of weeks. Well, 2 weeks, I guess. 13 Redwall books. That's going to be fun. I already have the first thumbnail. Also made the first thumbnail. It does have a mouse wearing a Santa hat, because it's Christmas time, and that's going to be fun. I am planning to do the monthly live stream, the one that may contain alcohol and everything, on the 28th of December. I was planning to have a guest, but I have not found a guest for this one, and that's partly because I'm really bad at asking people. And that's probably the main thing, is like me asking people is really bad. And I've messaged a couple of people that have not replied. So I'm like, okay, maybe they don't want to talk with me for all kinds of reasons. Totally fine. So I'm still, maybe I'll still manage to find someone to join me as a guest for the 28th, or it'll be just me, just, talk about the year, talk about the usual stuff that happens. That will be on the 28th of December. And then maybe I'll do a sprint on the 30th. I don't know yet. That's something I'll have to figure out because, that's in, well, I mean, it's in a week. But that would be the final sprinting for the year. And then who knows if I'll be back on the 2nd of January or after that. We will find out. So that's roughly the plans. But mostly it's going to be Redwall and not doing much for the next week, I guess, which is good enough. And well, if I get the Mormonism video out on the 24th, that would be absolutely fucking brilliant. But time, time is something of an issue there. I should have started earlier. I should have started much earlier, been more forceful. But that's part of the problem, right? Was definitely me having to overcome a lot of anxiety with this specific video of, wanting to get it right. I really want to get it right. And looking at what will be in the video, I could have probably stopped doing research like 2 months ago at least and recorded the whole thing much quicker. But there's always that fear that some nefarious, anonymous, whatever, vaguely defined one will come up in the comments and tell me that I got one specific detail wrong, and that will then obviously negate the entire video, which is, the kind of paranoia you develop when you're, first in academia, which definitely helps with building up a solid case of imposter syndrome, and add to that all kinds of other insecurities, and then suddenly it takes forever to get something produced. And I really want to have this video out just for my own sanity before the end of the year. Even if it's not tomorrow, I want to have this out before the end of the year. Just so I can, say to myself that I have managed to sort of pull off like a large project. I think that's yeah, it's mostly for my own sort of like feeling of self-worth and stuff. This would be very helpful. We'll see if I manage. It's certainly it is possible, I guess. And maybe I have reached that level of fuck it attitude that is necessary for me to finish anything, because it's easy to get caught up in, no, I can make this even better, and record every part like 3 or 4 times, and yeah. I will try to not worry too much. And thanks, and have happy holidays, and have a good time, everyone. If you can, relax, do some cool things with family, with friends, wherever you feel most comfortable, and all of that, right? I will remind you, Kat, that will be very lovely indeed. All right. With all of that said, let's all try and have a nice 23rd of December. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. I do really appreciate that every time. And yeah, have happy holidays and all of that. And